Good morning, everyone. Yesterday we saw about dependencies and conditions for parallelism, right? Mainly we saw data dependency, and data dependencies are of three types: the flow dependency, which is read after write; anti-dependency, which is write after read; and then output dependency, which is write after write. Okay, and we also saw control dependency where we have dependencies across loop iterations. And the other thing we saw was resource dependency where two instructions may use the same functional unit like adder or multiplier or something like that. So if they both use the same instruction, even though the data is independent, they're using the same resource. So that is resource dependency. And then we concluded with Bernstein's conditions for parallelism. So where you have a relation like Bernstein came up with three conditions for any two processes to or code segments to be parallel, right? So the input of the first and the output of the second, input of the second, output of the first, and output of both first and second code segments should be a null set. Like the intersection should be a null set. They should not have any conflict. Okay, so these conditions should hold for any two code segments to be running parallelly. Okay, and we saw some relations: commutative, it's not transitive, but it's associative, and things like that. We also saw an example uh, where we had five different statements, and based on that we came up with a dependency graph. And also when we executed serially, it took some number of steps. It took 5 steps, and then when we do it parallelly, we were able to do it in 3 steps. Okay, so this is a considerable improvement. So that's what we saw yesterday, okay, in last class. So today we will continue with that. So now we are going to explore more into this parallelism. The first thing is hardware parallelism, where so your parallelism is dependent on the hardware resources. So mainly it's about how many number of resources you have. For example, if you have say a k issue processor, it means that you can issue k number of instructions in one cycle. Okay, so if you have like four different instruction in your program, and you have a two issue processor, then you can take two instructions at one time. So generally what we have seen so far in your scalar or your sequential processors so far, like whatever you've learned in your computer organization or microprocessors course, is one issue processor, right? So you only take one instruction in one cycle, correct? You take the take one instruction, so PC will only point to one instruction, and only that one instruction will be fetched and then it will be issued. Okay, but in a k issue processor, you will actually issue, you can actually use a k number of instructions at a given time. You can execute k instructions. So that's the idea here. Coming to software parallelism, things are more flexible here. Okay, so the way you design your algorithm, so we saw how your matrix multiplication, right? So you can design a sequential algorithm. So whatever we have studied so far, right, we use three for loops for matrix multiplication. That's the serial algorithm. If you want to, you can also make it a parallel algorithm that we saw earlier, right? You assume certain things. You assume that you have n processing elements, and you actually based on that you parallelize the algorithm. So that's the software level parallelism. So once you are done with the algorithm, then you have to design the program, right? So the way you write the program, the programming style, and the actual program design, how you are passing the message, how you are communicating across the processing elements, those things matter. Okay, so this is done by program flow graphs. So similar to these are uh, program flow graphs are like something like flow charts, where you depict the entire program as a graph. Okay, in that there are two types of executing this parallelism. Okay, so two approaches. So more from a theoretical point of view, or like yeah, in a theoretical study, you can have a control based parallelism or a data based parallelism. Okay, so we will see these two in detail in a couple of slides, right? Uh, the key takeaway from this particular slide is, so you have two types of parallelism. One is hardware parallelism and software parallelism. Okay, and you have to align both together. So your software, here you assume that you are going to have n number of processing elements, and you're going to assume some kind of communication or programming style, correct? But in the hardware, it has to get reflected. Okay, so you assume, if you assume you have let us say 10 processing elements, but in hardware you actually have only two, so then you could have some problem, right? There's going to be a mismatch. So you have to align both your hardware and software parallelism. Okay, and role of compilers. So there are also parallel compilers, and compilers are very very important, uh, because most of the problems can be solved at the compile time itself. Meaning, let us say you have a for loop, and then inside the for loop, like we saw yesterday, there could be no dependency, right? So there's no control dependency across this loop. So then your compiler itself can actually detect this, and then it can unroll your loop. Okay, and then assign each unrolled part to independent processors. Okay, so compilers are also very important. And one of the primary job of this compiler is to uh, create a code, or like it has to generate the code that matches the hardware. Okay, so software would have assumed something, but the actual hardware, the compiler is the one who is going to generate that code and try to fit that code into the actual hardware. Okay, so to give an example of what a hardware level parallelism and software parallelism is, right? So we will assume a two issue a processor. Okay, that's the hardware that we have. But when you're designing a software, the algorithm can work something like this. You can assume that you have n number of processing elements. In this particular case, you can have like four. You can assume four different processing elements. Okay, so on theory, on like on a software design, you all these L1, L2, L3, L4 can be executed parallelly. Okay, and then X1, X2 can be done in the next cycle, and finally in cycle 3 you can just get your computation completely done. Okay, so this could be possible in the software, but you don't know what the hardware you have. Now if you come back, so if we assumed two issue processor, right? So what will happen? So your X1, so your X1 will have to wait for both your L1 and L2, right? So hey, sorry, so yeah, this is okay, correct. So in cycle 1 and cycle 2, you are getting this instructions, and X1 is going to execute this in the cycle 3. Okay, and in this cycle 3, you are going to have your L3 also issued. Okay, so now you can only maximum you can parallelize only here. Okay, otherwise you'll have to fetch in a single cycle and then issue two instructions for execution finally. So what you will have is whatever that could have been done in 3 cycles, you're doing it in 7 cycles. Okay, so that's the mismatch that you have between your hardware and software parallelism. Okay, so the idea take away is that, so whatever software you're designing, they may have some hardware overhead because of wrong assumptions, so that has to be filled. The other thing that could happen is the inter-processor communication. So here there are sequential execution that's going on in two different processing elements. Okay, so this is a dual processor. So you have one processing element here which is executing serially, the other processing element which is executing serially. Then there are places where your processing elements will have to wait for data from the other processing element. Okay, so here your S1 is from process from A, right? So S1 has to send the data to your B, so it has to wait. So there has to be an inter-processor communication, and this is very expensive. Okay, so whatever happens within a processor is actually fast, and when you have to communicate across, then it takes some time. Okay, so you need to minimize this communication also. So that's also a key point. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's look at the next topic. So this is program partitioning and scheduling. So now that we have understood the basics of parallelism and what are the different issues, now we have to see how we go about taking a problem and then how we are going to parallelize this. Okay, so first thing we need to understand is the granularity. So how much do we want to parallelize, or how deep you want to go? Like we saw in the last class. So the parallelism can be done at the instruction level itself. So you have an add instruction, two add instructions. You can say one add instruction will go to one processing element, the other add instruction will go to the other processing element. Okay, or it could be at the application level. You can say, oh, this particular application itself will run on one processing element, and the other application is going to run on the other processing element. Okay, so there are and there are lots of variations in between too. The next thing is latency. So now we saw that so latency is the time it takes, right? So for you to uh, uh, send one instruction and wait for it to complete. Okay, so that's the latency. And this is very very important because there are different types of latencies. So one is the computation latency. For example, if you want to do addition generally takes one clock cycle, but when you say take multiplication or division, it's going to take more number of cycles. Like say it could be from 4 cycles, or it could also take 20 or 40 cycles. Okay, so that's the computation latency. Now there is also communication latency, where we saw earlier, right, that where there was inter-processor communication. In that case, when you are waiting for some data from some other processing element, then that will take some time. Okay, so that's the communication latency. And there's also memory latency, and there are so IO latency. Different types of latencies are there. Okay, so mainly we will see here memory latency and synchronization latency, because the other thing we already we calculate as part of our computation. Okay, so as part of granularity, we will consider the computation latency, and as part of your the actual other latencies part, you cover in the you cover memory latency and synchronization latency. Okay, and we'll see different parallelism levels. So as I told you, so we have instruction level parallelism, then there is a loop level parallelism, so where you can unroll loops for certain number of times. Like for example, if you have a loop of 1 to 100, and you have 10 processing elements, right? So you can actually unroll this loop and give 10 loops to each of these processing elements. And it could be at procedure level, where you can say this particular procedure or this function is going to run on one processing element. Okay, and there's a sub program level, and there is a job or program level. Yeah, so job or program level is again the application level also. Okay, and we saw about communication latency, right? So this is a diagram that gives you a good idea. So as we see here, so it goes from instruction level all the way to loops, procedures, subprograms, jobs, or application level. Okay, so as you see here, as the levels go from high, like from the application or job level to your instruction level, your communication demand is also going to go down. Why? Because uh, you're going to have, so here the amount of data that has to go from one processor to the other is going to be very high, but here it's going to be less. Okay, and similarly, if you the deeper you go, higher the degree of parallelism. Okay, so for example, if you have instruction level parallelism, that's the highest level of parallelism you can get. Why? Because you have so much flexibility. Let us say you are dealing with, say, 10 or 15 instructions. These 10 or 15 instructions, you can assign it in any form. Okay, you can actually have different combinations of those instructions, and you can play around with it to get the best benefit out of the parallelism, right? But at the job level, you may not. For example, for a particular job, right? So that job, the job may have, say, hundreds or thousands of instructions. Okay, so those hundreds or thousands of instructions you cannot parallelize within, because they're all going to run on one processing element. Okay, so this is the very coarse grain, or like you don't have that much flexibility of parallelism. But as you go deeper, you get more degree of parallelism. Okay, but at the same time, it's also very very expensive and to do this. Okay, when you have a bunch of instruction and you want to get the optimal schedule, then that's going to be a problem. So there's going to be a trade off here. Okay, so we will see about grain packing and scheduling. Okay, so grain packing. So grain is nothing but the granularity we talked about, right? So how much deeper you want to go. Finer grain size means the finest grain size is the instruction level. Okay, and the coarsest is the application level, and we are going to go somewhere in between. Why? It's because it's actually it's easier to do the scheduling at the higher granular level. If you take the previous example, it's easier for me to say, okay, this job run on this processing element. It's easier to track that way. Okay, you have a PID and you just have to track that PID, and that will take care of everything. But if you have to track at instruction level, the overhead becomes more. Okay, you have to track this particular instruction is running in this processing element, that instruction is running in some other processing element. Then you have to, if they have some dependency, then you have to synchronize. Okay, all these things is going to happen, so that overhead will be more. Okay, so there are two fundamental questions that are there in parallel programming. The first one is, how can we partition a program? Okay, first let us say you have a program. Now how do you partition it? So that's the first question. The second thing is, now what is the optimal size? Okay, so now I have parallelized it. What will be my optimal size of my grain? And I can issue that grain for uh, execution. Okay, so these two questions, if we answer, we will know how to do parallelism. Okay, how to parallelly execute. So that gives us the grain size problem. So the grain size problem is the to determine the size and number of grains. So we will see that with an example now. Okay, so there's also this parallelism versus scheduling synchronization overhead trade-off that we saw. Okay, so we saw this briefly. And grain packing approach. So this is the solution that we are going to propose for this grain size problem. Okay, so this was introduced by Krutrashu. I don't even know how to spell this. Krutrashu and Lewis. Yeah. So they proposed it in 1988. So the interesting thing is, most of these problems were solved in the 70s and 80s itself. Okay, but still these are relevant today. Okay, so that's why I still have this name here. Why? Because we need to know these, most of the fundamental problems in computer science have already been solved in the 70s and 80s. Whatever we are doing today is only an incremental thing. It's only evolutionary research that is being done today. All the revolution has been done earlier. Okay, so so in this grain packing approach, it's a very simple approach. So we have a program graph. Okay, and then we choose the number of we choose the grain size. Okay, so the grain size is nothing but the number of uh, uh, clock cycles or machine cycles it takes to execute that particular node. Okay, so that will represent that as the grain size. Now based on that, the program graph we already know, right? So it's something like a flow chart only. So we'll look at this example to understand this problem. Okay. So give me a second. In a class, I'll call you later. So yeah, where were we? Yeah, this example, right? So this is a very simple example. You have 17 different statements, and the 17 statements, it has a lot of assignments as well as some multiplications. Okay, so now let us see how do we parallelize this using the grain packing approach. Now, if you draw a program graph, it's going to look something like this. Okay, forget about these other envelopes. So it's just going to look like this, right? So these nodes represent the node number. First one is your node number. So this is your node number, node 1, node 2, node 3, all the way. So how many nodes you will have? You should have 17, right? Because we have 17 different statements. So each statement, each instruction is one node here. So this is the finest granularity we are dealing with. Okay. And followed by your grain size. And what we saw about grain size is nothing but the number of clock cycles. Okay, so how much clock cycle this particular node or this statement is going to take? So we saw the first few statements were only assignment statements, correct? 1 to 6, they're all assignment statements. You only had some assignments, like for example, yeah, let's go back. So we saw here all these, right? 1 to 6, they're all assignment statements. And then from 7 through 17, you have some multiplications. And here you see there are some multiplication with constants also. Okay. So this means that you don't have any dependencies. Okay. All right. So now coming back to this, what we will do is we'll just take one example, right? Hold on. We'll just take this 1, 2, and 7. Okay, so if you take 1, 2, and 7, so you just take 7. 7 is A times B. Okay, G equals A times B. So your 7, the statement, you're waiting for A because you need to have A data of A, okay, and data from B, 1 and 2. Okay, so there is a dependency of 7 from 1 and 2. Okay, so basically it's a dependency graph only, right? So this program graph, so you will plot it for the entire set of code that you have. So you get this thing. Now what you will do is you are going to envelop this into a next sized grain. Okay, it's called as grain packing. Okay, how are you going to do grain packing? You're going to combine those nodes that can be run independently. So if you remember, the first 6 can be run independently, and so is instruction 11. Okay, so we saw it only had two constants, if you remember. So those instructions you can actually do it in one, you can club it into one. Okay, and similarly you have the next level, so where you have you're waiting for the data from the previous envelope. Okay, and so you got these envelopes and you're going to give it some label. So you call this A, you call this B, you call this C, D, E, and you get this new graph here. Okay, so this is what you have. Now you got a coarser graph. So you packed the grains and you got a new graph. And in this graph, what you have? So A is nothing but A comprises of these many instructions. Okay, and these can be run in one step. Okay, and now you have other dependencies. Okay, so now you're going one level above. Okay, so this is a coarser grain, and in this coarser grain also you have the dependency graph, and here the dependency is shown, right? So for you're just waiting on A is the variable. Okay, A is the variable, and you need to wait for this much time. So you need to wait for 6 cycles to get the value of A. To get the value of B, you need another 6 cycles. So like that, you are going to give the labels to the edges, and you plot this graph. So once you get this graph, now we will know how to schedule this. Okay. Any questions so far? Guys, you guys following? I'm sorry? No doubt, it's clear. Kind of. Okay. All right. See, this is very important. Okay, so you will get some questions in this. You will have some statements, and you may have to come up with your dependency graph. Okay, so let me know if, just stop me whenever you have any questions. Some things could be very obvious to me, but only if you ask me some questions, I will actually think about it to explain it to you. Okay, otherwise I assume these are quite well understood. Okay. So now, once we are done with our graph, so then we have to do something. We have to execute this, right? So before execution, we have to come up with a schedule, and the schedule, you do it something like this. Okay. So you can also, you have to say, if you're doing it in a fine granular way, you have to say one should go to some processing element, two should go to some other processing element, something like that. You have to come up with that schedule. And similarly, if you are going with a coarser grain, then you have to say A should be done by one processing element, B should be done by one processing element, and also when, who should do. Okay, here it's obviously your A should do first. Okay, and then B. But here it may not be the case. If you have only two processing elements, whether to choose 1 and 2, or 2 and 3, or 1 and 3, so you have several combinations, right? So which two will yield the best result? So that schedule you have to come up. So that's a harder question. Okay. So if you take this figure, so this is the fine grain schedule. And how, see what I mean? So here you have chosen node 6 and node 4 to run parallelly. So this is your processing element 1, and this is your processing element 2. So you are assuming two processing elements, and in that, the first processing element you are giving 6. You are not doing 1 and 2. Okay, 1 and 2 is coming only here, and we are doing 6 and 4 here. Okay, so so how to come up with the schedule? So we'll talk about that. But now, so look at the schedule, right? So based on how independent your elements are, and then which is going to yield the best or the shortest time, you're going to schedule it first. Okay, based on that, you see the maximum time it takes for your program to finish is 42 cycles. Okay, now on the other hand, if you do a coarser grain, here also you have processing element 1 and processing element 2. Okay, so now if you do this, so A is supposed to execute first, because other B and C were dependent on A, right? So in spite of that, even though it is coarser granular, you can actually achieve a better result. So you see, you're just taking 38 clock cycles. Okay, so this one, you've actually packed it. So you've done your grain packing here, and then once you schedule it, you get you can finish it in lesser number of cycles. So all these I is your idle time, and this is your shaded areas are the delays. You have to wait, dependencies, right? You are waiting for that data to get ready. Okay, A is still working on the data. Okay, so you're waiting on it. So here there is nothing to do. Okay, so that's why this is these are all idle cycles. So here you've finished execution is idle cycle. So that's how it is represented. Okay, so if you take fine grain, so fine grain means more inter-processor communication, right? Because your 6 and 4, they are ready, but then 4 has to be communicated here. So communication will take some delay. Okay, similarly, your 1 and 2 may be required here, so this takes some delay. So that's why you see lots of delays here. It's your latency, all your communication latencies. But on the coarser grain, you get lower parallelism. Okay, communication delays may be less, but within a, right, you cannot parallelize further. So you have to choose that sweet spot to choose the grain size. Okay, so the strategy is this. So what we first did a fine grain first for higher degree of parallelism, and we packed the grains to reduce the communication overhead, and we later did the scheduling. Okay, so that is how you choose. The main question is, can it be done optimally? Can you do the scheduling optimally? How did we know that 6 and 4 has to be done first? If you were given this in your exam, you may not know, right? So you will actually do 1 and 2 probably, right? Not only in exam, if you are given this as an exercise, so you will not know. You have to work on multiple combinations of these, and then you need to have some kind of a heuristic to do this. And if you've learned algorithms, this particular problem, scheduling, right, the optimal scheduling of these instructions, parallel instructions, is actually NP complete. Okay, so which means that there is no deterministic, non-deterministic algorithms that can prove that the schedule that I mean that you cannot come up with a schedule that is the optimal schedule. Okay, so it's an NP complete problem. So whatever you can come up with is only a heuristic or an approximate algorithm that can solve this for you. Okay, any questions, guys? You understood? Yeah, we have entered into the core of the subject, so I can understand, I can sense. Okay, so this is how it's going to be, okay, rest of the semester. So please get used to this, ask questions, get it clarified. Okay, so now we'll look at static multiprocessor scheduling. Okay, so there is we saw that there were some issues, right, with some overheads we saw. So to overcome that, we propose something called as a node duplication. Okay, so what we are doing here is, so let us take a particular example. So you have P1 and P2, okay, A, B, and C, right? So B and C are given to different processors. Okay, so now uh, an interesting thing is, what you can do is you can actually duplicate A. Okay, what happens if you duplicate A? A will be processed here, and A will also be processed in this processing element. Okay, so previously, if you saw in this schedule, right, so you were idle, you were not doing anything. Okay, and you had to start somewhere here. But so that's what we did here. Okay, so you have some idle cycles, and see your B is done fast, but see how much time you're taking here, your for C. Now, if you have A duplicated, so you will have redundant values computed, but your B and C can start parallelly. And somebody tell me what is happening here? Why this advantage happened? What's the idea behind this? Where are we saving? Where are we saving time? Can somebody tell me? Shubham, can you point to someone? Shruti Singh. Hey Shruti. So, did you understand what I've just said here? So, what we are saying is, if you duplicate, yeah, so if you duplicate this A, right? So, currently P1 is executing this A, but P2 is not doing anything, it's idle. Okay, and it's taking some time. But if you duplicate A, so both P1 and P2 are doing the same, they're working on the same set of code here. Okay, they're doing redundant operation. But if you do that, you're saving time here. So B and C are executing at the same time. They started here only. So look at this, but whereas look at this, so this is longer, right? So can you tell me what happened? Why? Because of making this duplication, it is helping. Time to access A is reduced, right? So yeah, what's the time to access? Why is that? Why did that happen? Suraj Kishore, did you understand? Suraj, are you there? Hey, Shruti, yeah, got it. Thanks, Shruti. You're right actually. Okay, but let me just wait for a few others to respond. Mayank, Mayank Nigam. Yeah, can you please tell me what makes this top figure, right? So this is not good. Okay, not good, and this is good. So why is this not good and why is this good? Suraj, are you there? Okay, Suraj, if you're not going to answer, I'm going to mark you absent. All right, let's go. We'll randomly hunt. Rahul, Rahul Raj, are you there? Yeah, can you answer? This reduce start time. Why does it reduce start time? Okay, I'll just no context switching. Oh, interesting. Yeah, almost right. Dependencies are removed. Rahul, no. Dependencies is dependencies are removed. Okay, dependency is still there. Something is removed. Let me try someone else. Swedel, can you point to someone who you think can answer? Pradipta, reduce idle time. Yeah, by reducing idle time, why did I gain this much time? Right? The idle time, it's the same, right? So here it is idle, but here I'm running A. But why did this big shaded area reduce? That's my question. Hey, Sweden, you're there? Yeah. You want to answer? You're not sure? Okay. See, it's okay if you don't understand, right? Guys, if you had understood what I had told in the earlier slide, you would have answered this. This means that maybe my explanation is not clear enough. Okay. All right. So let me explain again. Okay. So what we are trying to do is, who's that? Vishwa. Process P2 is idle first while it's used in second. Also, finally. Yeah, Vishwa, you're correct. Do you have your mic working? Yeah, can you please explain? Okay. Yeah, correct. Exactly. Thank you very much. Very good. So that's the answer. Okay. It's the communication delay. So as you see, I mean, it's like, they give this find six differences between the two pictures. It's something like that, right? So what is the difference you see between these two? It's this arrow mark. So this arrow mark is not here. It's because, and they've given this dashed line for a reason, right? So because you have to pass the data from one processor to the other, the communication delay that happens is much larger. Okay, it's very expensive to communicate data from one processing element to the other. Okay, because of that, here you are doing that communication because of the dependency. So you are taking more time, but here the dependency is still there. Okay, you're still waiting for A, but your A is within your processor itself. Okay, for P1, B is waiting for this A, and C here is waiting for its own A. Okay, so you're avoiding this communication. Because of that, you have gained something. Okay, you have gained that time. Okay, which otherwise would have gone for communication latency. All right. All right, so now so that's what we have here. So you have the node duplicated. So together, node duplication with grain packing, right, will together give you a good result. Okay, so we start with fine grain program. You do a schedule the fine grain computation. Okay, and then you do grain packing, and finally you do a parallel schedule. So that's what we did in the earlier example too. Now we will look at one more example. Okay, so our favorite, right? So I think we are going to stick to this particular example for rest of the course, matrix multiplication. Okay, so so in this, so actually if you just want to know, right, so my BE project was related to something like this only. So I actually did parallel processing. I created my own cluster, and we tried to execute a standard benchmark. We tried to parallelize it, and then run it on the cluster. Okay, so that's what I did, and it was also matrix based computation only, right? Just for your information. So now we have a matrix multiplication, and you better get used to. Oh, voice is breaking. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me try to just have 5 minutes. Has it been the same? Hold on, just connect to my Wi-Fi. How is it? Is it better now? Hey Suraj, you're back. Can you hear me? Hey, can others hear me? Hey, can you guys hear me now? Voice is breaking still. Mhm. Should I disconnect and then come back?